January 20th, 1993, 7:23 p.m. TOXICITY, Switzerland. Audrey Hepburn stopped breathing. Her son Sean was holding her hand. Her partner Robert Wolders was at the foot of the bed. The doctor was checking her pulse. And then there was silence. The kind of silence that changes everything. The kind of silence that ends a life and begins 1,000 questions. But this silence didn't feel peaceful. It felt wrong, too sudden, too quick. 3 hours ago, Audrey had been awake, talking, saying goodbye, and now she was gone. Sean looked at the doctor, Dr. Michel Fournet, the private physician who'd been treating Audrey's colon cancer for months, the man who'd been administering her pain medication, the man who, 3 hours earlier, had given her an injection. "What did you give her?" Sean asked, his voice shaking. "Morphine," Dr. Fournet said calmly. "For the pain. It's standard protocol for terminal cancer patients." "How much?" The doctor hesitated. Just for a second. But Sean saw it. That flicker of something. Uncertainty. Or guilt. "The appropriate dose," Dr. Fournet said. "To manage her suffering." Sean looked down at his mother. 63 years old. 92 pounds. The cancer had ravaged her body for months, but she'd been conscious that morning, alert, saying goodbye to everyone, making peace, and then the injection, and then sleep, and then death. "I want an autopsy," Sean said. Robert Wolders looked up sharply. "Sean, your mother wanted to die at home, peacefully. An autopsy would—" "I want to know what killed her," Sean interrupted. "I want to know exactly what was in that injection." Dr. Fournet's face remained neutral. Professional. "Your mother died of cancer, Sean. Colon cancer, stage 4. It had metastasized to her liver, her lungs, her lymph nodes. The morphine simply allowed her to pass without pain." "She wasn't in that much pain 3 hours ago," Sean said. "She was talking to me. She was lucid." What changed? What changed was this. At 4:15 p.m., Audrey Hepburn had asked for pain relief. The cancer had been eating at her for months, and the pain was becoming unbearable. Not constant, but in waves. Sharp, stabbing waves that made her gasp and clutch at her abdomen. Dr. Fournet had been managing her pain for weeks. Small doses of morphine, carefully calibrated, just enough to ease the suffering without compromising her consciousness. Audrey had been adamant about that. She wanted to be present. She wanted to say goodbye. She wanted to be aware until the very end. But on January 20th at 4:15 p.m., the pain was bad. Really bad. Audrey was crying. Something she rarely did. Robert was helpless. Sean was frantic. And Dr. Fournet made a decision. He administered a dose of morphine sulfate. Later, he would say it was 15 milligrams, the standard dose for severe cancer pain. Appropriate, necessary, humane. But Sean remembered something else. He remembered the syringe being larger than usual. He remembered asking, "Is that safe?" And he remembered Dr. Fournet saying, "Your mother is dying. At this point, we focus on comfort, not longevity." At the time, Sean hadn't understood what that meant. Now, 3 hours later, standing over his mother's body, he understood perfectly. Comfort over longevity meant it doesn't matter if the morphine shortens her life by a few hours or a few days. What matters is that she doesn't suffer. But Sean had a different question. Did the morphine shorten her life by hours, or did it end it? The autopsy took 3 days. Sean insisted. Robert opposed it. "Let her rest," Robert pleaded. "She wanted peace. This is not peace." But Sean was immovable. "I need to know." The Swiss medical examiner, Dr. Audrey Hepburn, conducted the examination on January 23, 1993. His findings were delivered to Sean in a manila envelope on January 26. Cause of death: respiratory failure secondary to morphine toxicity in the context of terminal cancer. Sean read it 3 times. Then he called Dr. Hepburn. "Morphine toxicity," Sean said. "That means overdose." Dr. Hepburn was careful. "In the context of terminal cancer, Mr. Ferrer, Your mother's system was severely compromised. Her liver function was minimal. Her kidneys were failing. A dose of morphine that would be routine for a healthy patient could be fatal for someone in her condition. Did Dr. Fournette know that? Silence. Dr. Hebert. Did Dr. Fournette know that her liver and kidneys couldn't process morphine safely? Any physician treating a terminal cancer patient knows that. Then why did he give her that dose? Another pause. You would have to ask Dr. Fournette about his clinical judgment, Sean asked. Dr. Fournette's answer would haunt him for years. Your mother was dying, Dr. Fournette said when Sean confronted him. She had days, maybe a week. The cancer had spread to her brain. Do you understand what that means? It means seizures. It means hallucinations. It means screaming in agony. I gave her peace. I gave her dignity. I gave her what she wanted. She didn't want to die that afternoon, Sean said, his voice breaking. She wanted to die on her own terms, naturally. You took that from her. I took her suffering from her, Dr. Fournette corrected. There is a difference. The conversation revealed something Sean hadn't fully grasped. Dr. Fournette believed he had done the right thing. Not just medically, but morally. He had seen Audrey's deterioration. He had seen the trajectory of her cancer. He had known that her final days would be excruciating, and he had made a choice. End it quickly, while she was still herself, before the cancer destroyed even her mind. It was, in his view, an act of mercy. In Sean's view, it was something else entirely. Sean consulted with other oncologists, cancer specialists, pain management experts. The consensus was complicated. Dr. Fournette had administered a dose that was within the acceptable range for severe cancer pain. 15 milligrams of morphine sulfate. Not unusual, not reckless. But Audrey's compromised liver and kidney function meant she couldn't metabolize the morphine properly. It would accumulate in her system, depress her respiratory function, essentially stop her from breathing. Any competent physician would know this. Which meant Dr. Fournette had either A. made a catastrophic error in judgment, not accounting for her organ failure, or B. known exactly what would happen and done it anyway. The medical experts Sean consulted were split. Some said it was malpractice, a failure to adjust dosing for a patient with compromised organ function. Others said it was palliative care, prioritizing comfort over prolonging inevitable death. One doctor, an oncologist from Geneva, said something that stayed with Sean. At the end of life, the line between pain management and euthanasia becomes very thin. So thin that sometimes even the doctor administering the medication isn't sure which side of the line he's on. Sean wanted to sue, wanted to press charges, wanted Dr. Fournette to face consequences for what he'd done. But Robert Wolders begged him not to. Your mother would not want this. She would not want her death to become a public spectacle. She would not want her final moments dissected in court. Let her rest, Sean, please. And Sean, exhausted and grieving, relented. But he never forgave Dr. Fournette, and he never stopped believing that his mother's death had been hastened by a physician who had taken it upon himself to decide when her suffering should end. The controversy didn't end there. In the years following Audrey's death, the details of her final hours began to leak. Not from Sean, not from Robert, but from others who had been there. Nurses, medical staff, people who had witnessed Dr. Fournette's decisions and had their own questions. By 1995, a Dutch medical journal published an article examining the ethics of end-of-life morphine administration. It didn't name Audrey specifically, but it used her case as an example. A terminal cancer patient, compromised organ function, a morphine dose that resulted in death within hours. The article asked, is this murder? Is this mercy? Is this medical malpractice? Or is this simply the reality of modern palliative care? The medical community was divided. Some argued that physicians have a duty to alleviate suffering, even if it means hastening death. Others argued that intentionally causing death, even in a dying patient, crosses a fundamental ethical line. Dr. Fournette never publicly responded. He continued practicing medicine in Switzerland until his retirement in 2001. He died in 2008. He never admitted wrongdoing. He never expressed regret. But people who knew him said he was haunted by Audrey's death, that he would bring it up unprompted, defending his decision, insisting he had done the right thing, as if he needed to convince himself as much as others. Sean eventually came to a painful understanding. He would never know for certain what Dr. Fournet's intentions had been, whether the morphine dose was a mistake or a deliberate act of euthanasia. What he did know was this: his mother had died 3 hours after that injection. She had been conscious and aware before it. She had been dead after it. And the official cause of death was morphine toxicity. In 2003, 10 years after Audrey's death, Sean gave an interview to a Swiss newspaper. It was the first time he spoke publicly about the circumstances of her passing. "I don't know if Dr. Fournet intended to end my mother's life that day," Sean said, "but I know that he gave her a dose of morphine that her body couldn't handle. I know that he knew her liver and kidneys were failing. And I know that 3 hours later, she was dead." "Do you think it was euthanasia?" the interviewer asked. Sean was quiet for a long time. Then, "I think it was a doctor making a decision that he believed was compassionate. But I also think it was a decision that should have been my mother's to make. And it wasn't. He took that choice from her." The interview sparked controversy. Some praised Sean for speaking out about the gray areas of end-of-life care. Others criticized him for questioning a physician's medical judgment and tarnishing Audrey's peaceful death with accusations. Robert Wolders, in a rare public statement, said, "Audrey died with dignity. She was surrounded by love. She was not in pain. That is what matters." But Sean couldn't let it go, because for him, what mattered was not just how she died, but who decided how she died. In 2010, Switzerland passed new legislation governing end-of-life care. The law required explicit consent from patients for any medication that could hasten death. It required documentation of the patient's wishes. It required oversight. Sean liked to think his mother's death contributed to that change, that the questions surrounding her final hours had forced the medical community to confront the ethical complexities of palliative care. Dr. Hepburn, the medical examiner who had conducted Audrey's autopsy, was asked about the case in 2012. He was retired by then, free to speak more candidly. "The morphine killed her," he said bluntly. "Not the cancer. The morphine. Her cancer would have killed her eventually. But on January 20th, 1993, at 7:23 p.m., it was the morphine that stopped her heart. Was it intentional? That is a question for Dr. Fournet, and Dr. Fournet is dead." "What do you think?" Dr. Hepburn sighed. "I think doctors face impossible choices at the end of life. I think Dr. Fournet looked at Audrey Hepburn and saw a woman in pain with no hope of recovery. I think he made a choice to end that pain quickly. Was it the right choice? I don't know. But I know it was a choice he made. And Audrey Hepburn didn't get to make it." That's the story that Sean Ferrer has lived with for 30 years. The story of his mother's death. Not a peaceful passing. Not a natural end. But a death that was hastened by morphine. Whether by accident or design, he will never know. What he does know is this: in the final hours of Audrey Hepburn's life, someone made a decision about when she would die, and it wasn't her. The last thing Audrey said before the injection was, "I'm tired. So tired. But I'm not ready yet. I still have things to say." 3 hours later, she was gone. Sean has spent 3 decades wondering what those things were, what she wanted to say, what final words she had planned, what closure she needed. She never got the chance. The morphine made sure of that. Is that mercy? Is that compassion? Is that medical care? Or is it something else? Something darker? Something that crosses a line that should never be crossed? The question haunts Sean. And it should haunt all of us. Because at the end of life, when we are most vulnerable, when we are in pain and afraid and desperate, we trust doctors to ease our suffering without ending our lives. But what happens when those two things become indistinguishable? What happens when the medication that stops the pain also stops the breathing? What happens when mercy looks exactly like murder? Audrey Hepburn died on January 20th, 1993. The official cause of death was cancer, but the autopsy said morphine toxicity, and her son believes she was killed by a doctor who thought he was being kind. That's not a peaceful death. That's a tragedy. And it's a warning. When we give doctors the power to manage our pain, we also give them the power to end our lives. And sometimes, in the gray area between suffering and death, between compassion and control, they make that choice for us, whether we want them to or not.